What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I wanted to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what just happened with Apple's earnings, what's going on with some big data coming out for tomorrow, and how all of this stuff may affect Tesla's share price going into tomorrow. But before I break anything down about all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed up to 5 free stocks. Now, this offer ends in just 2 weeks, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with the market and Tesla. So right now, at the time I'm recording this, Tesla is down a little bit in the after hours. Same thing for SPY and many other tickers. And that's because Apple is starting to drag the market down. Apple ended up not giving the strongest of guidances for this latest earnings report, and this is leading to the share price selling off a bit. So the question is, how will this affect Tesla going into tomorrow, and what is likely going to play out for the stock market, in my opinion? Let's first talk about Apple's earnings. It wasn't that bad, actually. It's just because Apple reported the fiscal fourth quarter earnings on Thursday that beat analyst expectations, but the overall sales projections are not the strongest for the December quarter revenue. So EPS was a beat. It did very well for that. Revenue was a beat for them. iPhone revenue met expectations. Mac revenue was a slight miss, and everything else was very close to expectations. However, like I said before, we have some weak outlook for the December quarter revenue, and this led to a sell-off. Their sales may not be the strongest as well for the quarter. And with this going on with additional macroeconomic factors, this has led to some fear amongst investors alongside more selling. And this is all part of, different ways to just move liquidity throughout the markets. And this may trigger a slight sell-off in the stock market, a very, very minor pullback, which is completely healthy. Not saying this is a crash or anything like super significant like that. It could just be very minor relative to the amount of upside we've seen. And I believe that this is going to likely start as soon as we open tomorrow. Now, with earnings coming out, Apple is going to be the last major earnings for this cycle. We have a couple of other smaller ones going into the next few weeks, but nothing is going to be as significant as this. And that's it for this week. Everything else is going to be very minor for tomorrow. Now, when it comes to other pieces of data, when it comes to seasonality, you could see the chart tends to show this very, very nice and significant uptrend between the end of October going into the start of November for most of these different cycles, at least for midterm elections and presidential elections as well. And that's what happened, right? We got a very, very sharp pump to the upside over the last couple of days. If you just look at SPY, for example, this was absolutely insane, this pump we saw. We saw this thing on the daily chart go from 409 to 430 in just about 4 days. That's pretty insane, pretty incredible, and just shows how overbought the market became. And that just makes me more inclined towards there being a sell-off because we're very overbought and we're due to cool off many of these indicators, especially the RSI. So that basically aligns with seasonality once again, a very sharp increase as soon as we hit November and a slight sell-off. It could last like a week or two before we continue to push higher, or it could just be very minor where we just trade sideways in a range for like a week to week and a half before the market continues much higher going into December. Either way, regardless of what happens, I don't see this sell-off being a crash. I don't see the market crashing to new lows because of it. I think that it's going to be a minor sell-off compared to this upside, like I said, and I think that the market's going to continue to uptrend as we approach the end of this year. But the market is due to pull back in a very healthy fashion because we're very overbought and we pumped so hard in such a little period of time. Now, when it comes to other indicators affecting the markets, don't forget that many signals suggest that the market was bottoming before. And I still believe the bottom we saw over the last few weeks going into last week, it's going to hold. Anyways, when it comes to other pieces of data, 1 hour before the market opens tomorrow, we have some very important jobs numbers coming out. We have the unemployment rate coming out. We want this to be around 3.8%. If it's a little bit lower than this may be a little bearish for the markets. If it's hotter than this, then this could be kind of mixed, but we want this to be very close to 3.8%. We're very close to that. Non-farm payrolls are coming out as well. That's going to be important for the labor sector. The labor force participation rate, which is not that bad. And then that's pretty much it for the labor numbers. So watch for unemployment data an hour before the market opens. After that, okay, 15 minutes after the market ends up opening, we have the PMI report coming out. Then we have the services PMI coming out a little bit later, about 30 minutes after market open. That could cause some volatility for the first 30 minutes, so just be very careful. Besides that, there's nothing else coming out for the market in terms of data for the after 30 minutes are the first 30 minutes are open are over for the market open basically. And after that, we just have a Fed speaker, which is going to be very minor. So after 10 a.m. Eastern time, things should go back to normal for data and nothing too big will come out. Now, when it comes to Tesla, we have the Model 3 Highland getting a lot of exposure right now. We're seeing more tests in the US, which is good news for Tesla. But when it comes to other pieces of news, there's some pieces of news about some strikes that could be targeting Tesla. Nothing's confirmed just yet, but if Tesla ends up getting unionized, this could be a little negative for them. So we're going to be very patient with this moving forward. I don't expect this to cause Tesla to crash new lows. However, I still think that the news is kind of mixed for Tesla. We had some good news involving California, and then other pieces of news as well. Nothing too bad so far. Tesla had good volume, 126 million almost, which is not bad whatsoever. Looking at some price versus short volume data, it was very flat. We had about 51% short volume, which declined to about 44%, showing more signs of buyers stepping in. And finally, when it comes to data, the same overweight ratings remain, as many analysts are expecting Tesla to outperform the market soon. Price price ratio is bouncing as buyers are starting to step in, and Tesla's gaining some strength relative to the markets. But we want to see this thing maintain its strength for an extended period of time. One day is not necessarily sufficient data for now. And then when it comes to what tends to happen on Fridays, is we're only green about 49% of the time on Fridays. So Fridays tend to be more red for Tesla, just slightly. So I think there's a risk of some downside. And watch for some higher volatility around noon and 2 o'clock p.m. historically. November tends to be a stronger month for Tesla. I think it's going to be a good month for Tesla. But for now, we're in a very, very healthy pullback state. It's going to be very healthy, very minor. And I think Tesla will recover later on anyways. I am bullish on Tesla for the medium term for November/December. But for the short term, I'm a little bit more bearish because of Aapl. I think that we could see a slight correction, not a correction, more like a pullback moving forward. So for Tesla, what levels should we be watching? You're going to be watching very carefully this 217 range. I think it's a little bit lower than that, like 216.6 around there to 217. If we get above that, there's some resistance at 217.5. Then we have 219 above that, and then we have 220. One thing worth noting about Tesla would be the fact that when the market was pushing alongside Tesla, okay, we had some bearish divergences that developed, and we have this historical resistance around this 220 area. Because what you'll see on the chart is, going back here, Tesla has a tendency of getting these rejections around this 220 area. You can see we touched 220 and rejected. We got very close to it, then we rejected. So we have some tight resistance, and we came very close to it this time around. And in the process of doing so, you'll notice that when we look at the 30 minutes time frame, we have a bearish divergence on Tesla. It's just a double bearish divergence. Same thing on the hourly, but it's not as strong as the 30 minutes. On SPY, the same thing happened. We have a bearish divergence on SPY, suggesting downside could happen as we're starting to drop. Same thing on Aapl. Aapl developed a bearish divergence near close, a very strong bearish divergence suggesting downside. Same thing with the QQQ. We have bearish signals, bearish divergence during the after hours, leading to more selling. Same thing on Nvda. We have a bearish divergence. Nvda is starting to sell a bit. It's not going to be that crazy in my opinion, but I still could see some downside for it. So anyways, with all these signals suggesting there could be a pullback coming, with Aapl potentially not giving the strongest of guidances, there's a good chance that this could have a negative effect on Tesla. So I went over the resistance levels to be watching for, right? We have this 216.5 area, 217.5, once again, 219, 220. If you want to be bullish, you want to see Tesla get above 221. If we break that, it could be on its way to 225 with some minor resistance at 222.5. But so far, I don't really think Tesla will get all the way up there unless we get like a really bullish piece of news, which I'm not seeing so far. And the odds favor a slight, very healthy correction, a very healthy little pullback. So watch support at 214, 212, 210 on Tesla. And if that fails us, 208 is coming. Don't forget, we also have a very big gap all the way down towards this like 205 area. So if Tesla loses 212, there could be even more aggressive selling that takes over. It's not going to be that crazy to the point where it's like relative to what we saw before, where Tesla sold off to 194. It's not going to be that bad, but I think it could be a little bit stronger than what we saw earlier on, like today when we saw Tesla selling off right here. So I think there could be more downside. So watch 212 as the most important resistance for tomorrow, in my opinion. If we lose this, I expect more selling for Tesla. We could see it come down towards 208 or 205. Then buyers should try to step in and push it right back up. And I think that we're going to be watching these levels, but anticipate a sell off early on. For SPY, we're going to be watching these key resistance levels. One thing about SPY, like I said, is that we had a bearish divergence developing on the chart. And simultaneously on SPY, you will notice that the daily made an attempt to bounce, but we ended up hitting this 50 EMA, and that's going to be some important resistance. We're actually below it during the after hours, and that's part of why we're starting to sell off. Then there's also Aapl that played a big role. So we had this trend line. I had this green trend line right here. I know it's a little hard to see. You guys can see this trend line right here. This was drawn out from the October low. And that was historical support for SPY. Now it's acting as resistance. We got almost a perfect rejection off of it. So if you're bullish, you want to see it break above 431. You want to get above this green trend line right here, the very small one you're seeing. That's going to be bullish if we break above this. So far, we failed. If you're bearish, you want to see it break below 429.5. If that fails us, watch this 429 area, 428.5, 427.5 as critical support. And if we lose that, it could come all the way down to about 425. What is more probable in my opinion? In my opinion, 425 is going to be critical support for SPY if we do end up breaking down, and also 427.5. If we lose 427.5 because of Aapl, watch 425 very carefully over the next couple of days. If we lose 425, this thing could start sinking kind of hard towards 422 to 421, back down to this liquidity zone. So there could be more selling if we lose 425 and 427.5. So watch those supports very carefully, and don't forget the levels I just called out. For Nvda, let's actually talk about Aapl first and Nvda, because Aapl, something very big is going on with it. Aapl is starting to sell off. It's down like 3% right now, and it's forming a potential flag on the smaller time frames. If Aapl wants to turn bullish, you want to get back above 175, and we're pretty far from that. If we're bearish, you want to see it break below 170.25 and then 169.25. If we lose 169.25, expect 168 to come pretty fast, followed by 166.6 and 165. In my opinion, it looks more bearish. We had a big drop, and overall guidance was not that strong. Because earnings wasn't that bad, it's not going to sell off like extremely significantly. It's going to be a minor sell off, in my opinion. But I still believe there's going to be some potential downside coming. We could see Apple start to sink a bit more. And I think that this could drag the market down a bit. So be very careful, guys. This is going to affect the QQQ and other tickers like that. For the let's go back to Nvidia. I know I kind of skipped that over. Nvidia, then the QQQ. So for Nvidia, we're going to be watching resistance around this 435 area. If we break this, watch 438 to 440, because historically, this 438 level has been key resistance, and we've seen Nvidia reject very close to it many times. So if you want to turn bullish, you want to get above 438 and then 440, and that's when Nvidia could start pumping more. But if Nvidia ends up losing key support at this 430 area, you're going to be watching 425 as another key support. If we lose 425, okay, that's going to be the next level. There's going to be a big risk of downside. We could see this thing come all the way down to about 420 to 421. If we lose 425, that's going to be a somewhat bigger drop, so watch that very carefully. If anything, this could be establishing a head and shoulders like pattern, so be very careful if this thing pops and then drops. And you want to be very careful on Nvidia. The market could drag it down a little lower, and we're going to be watching Aapl very carefully and how it affects us. Nvidia on the daily was not looking that bad. It was trying to bounce, but we hit this critical resistance, and we're going to be watching the 50 EMA as another resistance. So there's a risk of some downside. If we lose these key levels, watch for more downside. Also, we have 428. I forgot to call out that level. 428 is a key support as well, and then 425. That's going to be the 20 EMA on the daily. If we lose that, I expect some more downside. If anything, I do anticipate downside nonetheless, and I still think it's going to affect the way the market moves. For the QQQ, I anticipate some downside as well, possibly, because we had a bearish divergence. Watch for resistance at 362.25. If we break that, watch 364 and then 365. And then for support, watch 360 as key support. It could be forming a head and shoulders like pattern, and we could see this thing start to sell off. If we lose 360, I anticipate it's going to come down to fill this gap at 358, and there could be some selling coming to it because of Aapl. So just be very careful when watching these levels. The odds do favor the downside. All right, guys, I'm going to try to be quick with the ending because I know this video is kind of late because I started very late and we had Apple's earnings to watch. So I'm going to go over just a couple of others very quickly. For the IWM, or the Russell 2000, we have a bearish divergence. It could retest 169, in my opinion, then potentially 167.5. I'm seeing a slight risk to the downside looking at it. Looking at Microsoft, it's not looking that bad. It might just trade sideways between 348 and 350. So far, it's trying to hold up. But if we lose 348, then I'd anticipate it to come down to 346.5. As of right now, it looks like it might just trade sideways. AMD has a risk to the downside because of this support right here. We have a head and shoulders like pattern and a bearish divergence. If we lose 106.39 or the 50 EMA, I anticipate some downside towards 102 or the 200 EMA. For the VIX, we have a bullish divergence that has developed, suggesting that the VIX may bounce, and we have this gap to fill at 16.8. It may get a small bounce just temporarily because of the market potentially selling off. And eventually, the VIX is going to reject, in my opinion. It's going to reject at a lower high, maybe around 16.8, maybe 17.45. Somewhere here, it's going to reject, and the market's going to bounce later on as well because of that. So the market might drop and then pop later on just by looking at the VIX right now. The dollar index, trading flat, it's not really doing anything too significant, so it might just continue to remain flat. For Coinbase, we have a bearish divergence on the chart. I could see this thing testing 80. If it loses it, watch for a test of 77.65. For Google, we have a potential downtrend that could form right here off this head and shoulders like pattern. If we lose support right over here, around this 128 area, we could see this start sinking towards 125 again. So be very careful on Google with this head and shoulders. There is a risk to the downside that could be coming. The 10-year treasury yield, it's kind of like trading flat. It's not really doing much, but if it bounces and tries to fill this gap, this could be bearish. So just be very careful with that. For Amazon, we're very flat right now, not really doing much. If we lose 137.5, I could see this thing sinking towards 136.5 as well. So we're going to be watching that very carefully. Just like Google, there's a possible head and shoulders developing, but it's still kind of stationary, so I don't expect it to be that bad. And last but not least, for Meta had a bearish divergence that developed in the morning, got a little pop, and then it just dropped. There could be a head and shoulders right here. So if we lose 308, I expect it to come down towards 305 at the 200 EMA. And then that's going to be where this imbalance is down here. If we lose that, we could come down towards 299. So just be very careful on Meta. There could be a risk to the downside. So watch it all very carefully. And we called out 318 on Meta just yesterday. So we did reach the level. It's just that it rejected instead of trying to hold up. So that's it for now, guys. Have a great day. Please enjoy the evening or the night, wherever you are around the world, and do what you have to do. Please take care and be very prepared for some potential selling because of Aapl. Aapl is now down 3.05%, and Aapl may sell off more tomorrow morning. Watch the data coming out in the morning, and I'll see you guys tomorrow morning for the pre-market update. All right, that's it for now, guys. Have a great day, and peace out.